Jeff Mayers from wispolitics.com. Welcome to our virtual luncheon discussion today. We have a great program coming up. This is Women Voters in Wisconsin, How Age Differences, Issues, and Experiences Shape Opinions This Election Year. I want to thank our event sponsor, AARP Wisconsin. Also want to talk about some upcoming events that we'll be doing over the lunch hour in October. October 2nd, we're going to have experts from the La Follette Institute on UW-Madison campus talking about the top issues in the presidential race. Then on October 8th and 9th, over 2 days, over 2 lunch hours, we're going to have the second annual Midwest Polling Summit put on by WisPolitics. And we have a great program, and you can find out all the details at wispolitics.com. And then on October 15th, we're going to have 2 top Senate leaders, including one of our guests today, talking about the top Senate races that Wisconsin voters will be voting in addition to the presidential race on November 3rd. But today, as I said, we're going to talk about female voters in Wisconsin and the generational differences and how the different opinions have emerged with those generations. So I want to welcome our panel. We have a very interesting panel. I also already mentioned Senator Janet Bewley. She's from Northwestern Wisconsin, and she leads Democrats in the state Senate. Welcome, Senator Bewley.
Thank you.
Rebecca Kleefisch. She's the former lieutenant governor, and she's going to be talking to us from her home in Oconomowoc. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thanks, Jeff.
And now we have 3 female voters of different generations, and I'm really looking forward to talking more with these people. Catherine Smith, she's a 22-year-old college senior at UW-Whitewater. She's originally from Janesville. She's majoring in political science with a legal emphasis and a minor in philosophy, and planning to attend law school after graduation. This is going to be her second time voting in a presidential election. Eric Herrera, she's from Franklin, owner of EFH Trucking in Milwaukee. She's a 39-year-old mother of 4, a military vet, and a current member of the Wisconsin National Guard. She's starting an MBA program at UW-Milwaukee. Welcome, Erica. And Carol Ligler. She's from northern Wisconsin. She's a retired school teacher who taught family and consumer education for 25 years in the school district of Spooner and the Northwood School District in Minot. For the past 15 years, she's been an active volunteer and an advocate for families of all ages in her area. So welcome. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So, because we have so many, I'm probably going to call on you to, start with this. I guess I'm going to start with Senator Bewley. I'm going to ask all of you this question. Can you define how do you define your generation's mindset when it comes to politics and government?
I would describe it as evolving. My generation is the boomers. I was born in 1951 and am a pretty typical boomer who grew up in a family based on GI Bill benefits. I grew up in a city. My dad was a union member, and we had a certain mindset. There was a very strong emphasis on family, on the mother being in the home, and on the expectation that the boys would get an education and the girls would get married. So I grew up from that, which of course would have its accompanying relationship to voting, how you vote, what you think of when voting. But the boomers changed. We had so many things happen throughout the time that we grew up that we had the opportunity to change not only decide upon our political orientations, but how do we engage in society in general? Are we part of a group being female, or indeed do we go out and claim our own voice as just participants in society, not being just female? And I think that it's evolving then, and it's evolving now.
Okay, let's go to Rebecca Kleefisch, the former Republican Lieutenant Governor. Rebecca, how would you define the mindset of your generation?
I don't want to throw an entire blanket generalization over all of Generation X. I'm an Xer. I was born in 1975. And I thought it was really helpful that Janet gave a little bit of a backdrop for her belief set. And so I was raised in a small town in Ohio, and my dad was a commission envelope salesman. And so the amount of hustle you put in your bustle was the amount you brought home to feed your family. He also served on the Waterville Planning Commission. And so that was my experience in government when I was a little girl. And one of my very best friends from elementary and middle and high school had a dad who was the mayor of our small town. And so that too, I suppose, informed me quite a bit. But one of the things that I've realized a little bit later in life was what an influence my mom was. Because there are boomers, and just like Senator Bewley said, I think in that generation there was an expectation for moms to be at home, and my mom was at home, but when I was in middle school, my mom started her own business, and it was based on us, my sister and me. She started a dance school, and my mom owned a dance school for 10 years, and she gave me and my sister our first jobs, and I think watching her in that experience was really powerful. And I don't think I really paid much attention to how powerful and influential it was until later on in life. I always aspired to grow up and be just like Dad and go into sales and marketing and, own the world through hard work. And I started to realize that my mom, in cultivating a relationship with an entire community and growing her student base over years and giving young women jobs, had just as powerful an influence in our town.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go to Carol Ligler from Northern Wisconsin. Carol, a retired school teacher. Carol, how would you define the mindset of your generation in terms of politics and government?
Well, I have to say that we're far less liberal and we're far less diverse in our thinking than the younger generations are. I came originally from Madison, Wisconsin, and my mom was born and raised up here in Ladysmith and Bruce area and couldn't get out of this area fast enough and moved to Madison, went to Madison Business College, became a secretary for the state of Wisconsin. And I think she influenced me. Somebody else said that their mom had really influenced them. I think it was you, Rebecca. And my mom really influenced me too. She was a very strong woman. And because of that, I think I became a stronger person. And I believe a lot of my friends can somehow relate to that same situation. My dad had a one-man business in Madison, so he was not unionized. It wasn't necessary to unionize a one-man business. And as I said, my mom was a secretary for the state of Wisconsin. And then I went on to the university in Madison. And a lot of my friends that I have are also university graduates. So we are probably more educated than many in my generation, and hopefully we're a little more liberal in our thinking, or at least a little more diverse in our thinking than some of the others. But generally speaking, up in this neck of the woods, which is the Spooner-Trigo area, by the way, I find that there's some pretty stereotypical things going on, and I'd like to be able to change a little bit of that. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Erica, let's go to you. Erica, you're a business owner and a mother and a military vet, and so if you don't want to define your entire generation, maybe define your mindset in terms of politics and government.
Well, I'm also Latina, so I'm come from Mexican immigrant family. I cannot define my entire generation because I have noticed that there has been a lot of differences in the way they think and the way, even, for example, I'm a twin, My twin and I don't think alike in any way politically at all. So we have the major differences above all. It's something that has unfortunately separated us. I actually, I'm born and raised in Chicago. Both of my parents are immigrants from Mexico, and they migrated here in the 1980s. There has been no political affiliations from either one of them. None of them have raised us to think politically or affect us in any way, shape, or form. When I was 18, I wasn't excited to vote. I wasn't excited to buy my first box of cigarettes or anything for that matter. So it wasn't instilled in us in any way. Additionally to that, it wasn't something that it comes across because of where they come from. I didn't vote. I don't vote. I never, I guess because I turned 18 and I signed my military contract and I said, away I go, and I did school and I did military and I traveled. I didn't have that kind of time. And to me, it was, well, it doesn't apply to me. Therefore I move on. Every time like someone comes up to me, do you want to register to vote? I usually lie. Oh, I can't vote. Sorry. And I think that's how I was able to get rid of them. Until most recently, this is, besides the President Obama, this is the second political time that I'm going to vote. It struck a chord. It basically resonated with me with a lot of things that is going on. And I'm hoping that this time my vote does count, and my voice does count, but if something has to change.
Okay, thank you, Erica. Okay, Catherine. Catherine is the college senior at UW Whitewater. How would you define the mindset of you and your fellow students? And if again, like the others, you don't, you can just talk about yourself too.
Absolutely. So I believe, I don't really want to generalize our entire generation, because my generation being Gen Z / millennials, kind of like on that cusp border, we come from an array of diverse backgrounds. But I think that one thing that I can positively say about our generation is we're the most socially conscious. We're conscious not only about healthcare, social issues, economical issues, but also environmental issues as well. As you see right now, you see younger generations protesting with the Black Lives Matter movement. You see a lot of negotiation matters when it comes to economic refunds for our students, which we still haven't received as college students, which is something that's super disappointing, and definitely our voice needs to be listened by. However, we are very socially conscious of our surroundings. We are very diverse. We come with a lot of inclusivity, and that's all we really want at the end of the day, is just our voices to be heard, because right now in this election period, our voices are one of the most important voices to be heard, and we want action out of what we want out of our voices.
Mhm.
Thank you. I want to remind the audience that when you register for this event, you could have submitted a question, but if you're thinking of a question now, you can go to the chat function at the bottom of your screen labeled Q&A, and you can type in a question and we can get to some of those later on. They'll flow through me. Okay, Catherine brought up issues, that were important to her and her generation. And so I want to go through our panel now and talk about some of the top issues, or what is a driving issue for you, or what do you think a driving issue is for you and your peers? Carol, why don't we start with you, Carol Ligler from Northern Wisconsin.
Well, of course, in my age group, we're all very concerned about Social Security and Medicare and the cost of prescription drugs, because that's where a lot of our money goes. And so I think that's probably the number one overall issue, or issues, I should say. There's more than one that we're concerned with. Personally, I don't know if this is the time you want me to answer it personally, but personally, I'm concerned about the environment. I see that so many of the things that we enjoy and want to do and feel very strongly about has to do with our environment. And if we don't have a healthy environment, we're not going to be able to enjoy those other things either. And so that's probably the top priority for me. But I'm also concerned about Social Security and Medicare and the price of prescription drugs, because that's in my age group, we're kind of involved with that a lot.
Yeah, but yeah, by all means, you know, if I don't ask the right question, give me the answer you want to give me. It's okay. And you did a good job there, Carol. Erica, what about you? What's a driving issue for you and maybe for your generation?
It's the same as Carol. It actually, I'm the healthcare. One of the biggest thing, being a small business owner, I need the healthcare. My kids need the healthcare. Yes, granted, I'm able to get it through the military, but what about my mom who needs the help? She's an older person, my mother-in-law as well. Other people who have the pre-existing conditions that are not able to get in. I mean, from transfer from one medical to another. The most recent Social Security, I actually ended up telling my employees, hey, I'm not going to participate in this most recent tax cut that is being given to us. Military, we have no choice. The little things, and I hate to say the inconsistency, the unity that we're not, just like Catherine said, the Black Lives Matters, where you see that a lot of things is affecting us as a society. A lot of my friends being that we Latinos are supporting a lot of this Black Lives Matter movement, because although we may not be of that particular race, I hate to say it, we are still a minority to the outside world, and we're still going to be looked at not by what we look like, even though I'm a veteran, but by the color of my skin. So those are the things that I want to be able to, it's a scary world where I'm going to leave my children if one day I'm not around. I want to be able to see that something is going to change in the future.
Thank you. Let's go to Rebecca Kleefisch, the former Republican lieutenant governor. In terms of, you know, what's a big driver for you this election? You're very involved in campaigns around the state, and so I'm interested, you know, what's driving it for you?
Sure. The funny thing, Jeff, is the data would tell you that women in my generation are most concerned about the situation surrounding COVID-19, and then secondarily, the economy, and then third, the issues of equality and policing, public safety, and the assurance that we'll be able to raise our children in neighborhoods where we can let them play in the streets and feel confident that nothing will happen. And honestly, that's probably not too far from the truth for me. You heard a couple of my peers on this panel say healthcare. Well, you know, and Janet knows that I have a pre-existing condition. I had cancer. And so the very idea of socialized medicine terrifies me, because I don't want to be told one day to stand in the back of the line because I've already had enough health care. You know, I'm 45 and I think I have a whole lot left to contribute to this world. And so I want to make sure that I get the health care that I need, that my children get the health care that they need, that my boomer mom gets the health care that she needs. And my generation is the new sandwich generation, where we're caring for the well-being of our parents, who for the most part are still completely able, but then also our kids. And we were talking about this before your show even started, the fact that our kids are either going virtual or back to school face-to-face in a brave new world, an environment that is in the middle of a healthcare crisis. And so I would say that I'm not too far away from all of the polling data. I'm concerned about COVID-19 and how we move forward with all the attached issues, everything from education to the economy. I'm concerned about making sure that we have jobs for our neighbors across the state and that our economy continues to grow. The CBO yesterday, the Congressional Budget Office, said that we're going to see GDP growth of 1.6% through 2050. That's horrible, because 4 years ago at this time, we were actually envisioning a world where we would be at 4% growth. And then also, you know, I want to raise kids in an America where everybody is fulfilling our constitutional promise of equality. You know, that's written into our Wisconsin Constitution as well. And I want to make sure that it's not just my family and my girls, but everybody who feels that our Constitution is being lived on a daily basis here in Wisconsin.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to Senate Minority Leader Bewley, also in northern Wisconsin. Senator Bewley, what's a top issue from for you and your constituents?
Well, it's hard for me because I represent. I have to speak for people like Carol. She's my constituent, so I represent her concerns and the concerns of someone who could be completely opposite her in orientation. So I have to be kind of eclectic. But what I would say is that I believe I want to be able to provide people with security, with the ability to look to tomorrow and know I'm going to be okay. And that means that they need access to affordable health care in some form. I don't think that we're ever going to get to what is called socialized medicine, because we're going to create a system our own that is going to be born out of democracy, just like everything else. In other countries, they were superimposed on parliamentary systems, and I think that we are going to come up with what makes sense for a mature capitalistic society. But I'm always concerned about lack of access to the basic components of life that are distributed throughout our society in a very inconsistent way. You can take something as simple as broadband. 20% of the households in my district do not have access to affordable broadband. So for some of those, it means no wires, nothing, can't get it, they won't go. Or the household is too poor, or they only have one computer and 5 people need to use it and they don't have the bandwidth. So 20 households, that's a lot. 20% of the households can't do distance learning or work from home. That sets them at a total disadvantage. That's not their fault, and the other thing, and it is so much harder to get mental health services in rural areas. We're trying, but it's still very, very far behind. We suffer greatly from addiction and mental illness, can't get the services to rural areas. Transportation is a kick. If you don't own a car and have enough personal wealth to be able to get from A to B, you can't get there. You can't get there. There's no public transportation for the most part. So you have to own a car. You have to be wealthy enough to own a car. We don't have the kind of housing. So it gives me the opportunity to see what are the things that you need in order to thrive. And I want to see to it that we have a society that is going to work towards making sure that everybody can get that. Your zip code shouldn't say, okay, here's what you have and here's what you don't. But the other thing is that I realize very much that lack of those things concentrated into populations that have been denied those things historically. It is not a surprise at all to me that the social injustices, and we're labeling it right now Black Lives Matter. I'm not surprised at all, because they have lived for generations under far worse conditions than the worst conditions that I have in my district right now when it comes to access of the basic things that you need to get ahead. So it's sort of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. They were born without bootstraps and they had no way to get them. So that's what I want. I want access to the things that society provides for some, but not all.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to, again, for those who are tuning in, I ask a few questions and then we'll work in as many audience questions as possible. This year is a big campaign year. There's a lot of state senate races, a lot of legislative assembly races, there's congressional races, and of course there's the presidential race. I want to start with you, Carol. The polls, the campaigns are focusing a lot on the female vote. Are they getting it right? What are they missing? What advice would you give the strategists?
Well, I think they're getting it right. But the thing that they have to remember most of all is to listen to what these female voters want and need. And I think that a couple of our panelists have already touched on that. We need to have so many of these things that are family related. And if they listen to the female voters, they're going to do much better. And I think they are already doing some better than they have in the past, but they need to do even more yet as far as listening to the needs of their constituents. I have written so many letters to Congress people, and all I get is a form letter back, and it says the same thing to everybody. And then when it comes to their votes, so many times it doesn't even come close to what I want. And it isn't that I want everything to be my way. That's not the point. But I just feel sometimes that they aren't even listening. And Janet, you're not one of them.
Oh, thank you, Carol.
Okay. Catherine from UW-Whitewater. Catherine, do you think the candidates and strategists are getting it right? Are they asking the right questions and listening to female voters?
I think in general, yes. When it comes to my mother's generation she's a self-made entrepreneur, single parent, I'm an only child. I think they're listening to her. However, do I think that they're listening to me in my generation? No. I think that they kind of cultivate our generation as one, and they gender specify us as one, rather than recognizing that we have an array of genders. It's not just male and female anymore. There's cisgender, there's non-binary, there's so many different, even just like non-gender associations that are not having their voices heard. And if I can't even get my voice to be heard, I can't imagine what it's like to have a non-binary gender identification, or even no gender identification, what their voices are even being heard. So one thing that I highly do suggest is for politicians and legislative writers and policymakers to really not hone in on a specific generation, but hone in on the needs and wants of different variations of people when it comes to diverse backgrounds.
Yeah, I would say media should do that too, because I'm often guilty of sweeping generalizations. Erica,
Absolutely.
Erica, what about you? Do you think that your voice, your concerns are being heard by the candidates and the campaigns?
If you look at it in a perspective of Latina or an actual woman, no, I don't feel that that's the case. I actually feel more that it's directed to not help us in any way. I mean, I'm a mom of 4, and it's sad that I have to keep telling my kids, okay, this is the world that we have to live in. This is how it's going to be, and it's a little bit different. So I don't feel that that's the case, especially when I talk to my friends and I get the same feedback that we're not having our voices heard. It's probably one of the deterrences as to why I've never voted. I've always felt that even if I vote, it doesn't really make much of a difference. I don't see, if anything, I see it more dominated into a specific gender, a specific group, more than anything. And again, we're immigrant families. A good portion, well, not a good portion, 100% of my family is all immigrants, but most of us are actually citizens. Even though we come from immigrant family, my mom and my dad, a lot of us are born here. So we're now at a position where we are able to vote. But we don't want to, because it hasn't targeted us at all. It hasn't shown us what we can and how we can be able to progress or be able to even live the American dream. To be honest with you, starting my business, I even had an issue with that, being a Latina and being a woman. It basically, and I hate to say it, City of Milwaukee was telling me, no, you can't have that certification because I was a woman, and my husband, and everything had to be dominated by my husband, because truckers are known for majority men. It's not a industry that it's focused or geared towards women, but we do other aspects. And this is exactly what the rest of it is they try to focus on anything. And even though I may be a stay-at-home mom, as I call myself, I really am not, because I'm doing much more than that. It's a small business, but it doesn't help us. It doesn't gear. I see that it's focused towards other items rather than what we as Latinos and as a woman should be focusing on.
Let me ask a follow-up, Erica. Do you think that female politicians are better, or do you think they're more in tune with what you're feeling, or is it not the gender of the politician? What do you?
I hate to say it, it would be. It would be because when I did a lot of the marketplace, I'm going to point out to you, Rebecca, she was a speaker
I
at the
love
majority of the.
marketplace.
Yes.
Talk what marketplace is, though.
It's actually, I love it. And that's where I met Rebecca, and I admire her ever since. So I'm really honored to be here part with her as a panel. Marketplace is an event that allows us small business owners to be able to congregate together, be able to take on projects, be able to meet contractors. It's a networking event for us. So they do, and I again, I admire Rebecca because she was able to tell us more about how her small business was able to become from small business, and she was into politics. So it was one of the things that got me into politics. And I know that was one of the questions, is I admire Rebecca for that. And I follow her ever since because of her story. So yes, it does. When I saw Rebecca, it was like, wow, it's a small business owner. She's a mom and she's a woman. Like, whoa, it resonated with me, and it set well with me that I thought, okay, well, if she can do it, wow, anyone really can. And she completely understands us because, just as she said, she has a pre-existing condition. She has all the little items that everyday women, we go through, but we go through it silently, because we feel we're in a dominated world by men. And I've experienced it myself. Again, every time I go anywhere, they always thank my husband for his service.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a 20-year veteran, 20-year veteran. That's a slap in my face because I'm a woman. I'm not allowed to be a veteran because I'm a woman. I'm not allowed to be a trucker. I gave jobs to over 30 trucks from 2016 to 2019. And every time it was always an obstacle. I always had to go through some hurdle. I had to contact somebody to be able to help me either get a contract, or I was told to go home. I think City of Milwaukee again said to me, you should stop what you're doing and just sign up under so-and-so. And I said, I'm not going to stop what I'm doing and sign up under anyone. I'm going to be me. I'm going to do. And as a Latina and as a woman, it really is tough. When I got the loan, the Small Business Administration said, oh, why does she need the money? She's not a trucker. She doesn't drive. No, you're right. But there is an administrative end to the businesses. The businesses, human resources, administrative portion of it, and any other major corporation does not run itself. We have people in the background, behind the scenes, who are running those companies, who are out there marketing, sales, contract, human resources, recruiting, you name it. But because we're women, we should be home taking care of our children. And I have 4 kids. Why I should be at home taking care of my kids?
Well, thank you for that. We're going to move to some audience questions now, and I may rephrase some of these, or I may read them as they are. But do you think that female politicians are, there's a lot of division in the country, and there's a certain meanness to our politics that wasn't there, when I first started covering politics, so I'm just wondering, from that standpoint, would female politicians be better? And I'm going to be talking to the 3 non-politicians here right now. Would female politicians be better at making, I guess, politics more civil? That's one of the questions from an audience member. Carol, why don't we give you a shot at that one?
Well, I think they would, but then I'm biased. I'm a woman, but there is a lot of meanness in our politics right now, and it just really, really hurts me and my generation because we have been so not used to this kind of thing. I do think that women tend to be more compromising. I think they're more willing to negotiate things and perhaps give up maybe some of the things that they really had thought they wanted in lieu of something that would be better. So I'm hopeful that more women will get involved in politics. Right now, we need to encourage younger women, and Catherine, you would certainly be one, to get involved and run for office, because we don't have a lot of women that are willing to give up their whatever they're doing now, their jobs or their home life, to run for politics, because it's a mean situation to get yourself in, and I would question my own ability to do that. I tend to be more soft-skinned about things, and but I think that there are some women that are really, really tough, and they're willing, like Erica, to stand up to the status quo and say, look, this isn't right. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to be me. And hopefully that will prevail.
Well, we haven't, before I move on to Catherine here, Wisconsin's never had a female governor. The U.S. has never had a female president. Many European countries, Western democracies, have had female leaders. And so it does seem to be something missing in Wisconsin and the country as a whole in terms of having female leadership. Catherine, what do you think the women, female politicians would be better at having a more civil discourse? That from the audience question.
I don't like to compare genders when it comes to what each individual person can do. However, I do look at the background. And as of right now, when it comes to handling COVID-19 and the pandemic, if you look at other countries and their women leadership, you would see that their women leadership have handled the COVID-19 pandemic far better than America has right at this specific point. But to get more on the topic of female leaders, I'm still looking for Rebecca Kleefisch to run for governor of the state of Wisconsin. I don't know about all of you, but Rebecca is someone that I've actually looked up for a very long time. I first met her when my cousin was running in politics. So I met her at a very young age, and I don't know if she necessarily remembers this, but it was something that definitely sparked my interest when I became into politics. I've never really had it easy in my life. Growing up with a single parent is always very difficult. First-generational college student, first-generational high school graduate. Life really isn't easy, so we do have to have a hard skin. I think Carol brought up a very great idea and topic, is that for women, in order to be in office, we have to have tough skin. And we've been fighting that battle for a very long time. I think we always will have a tough skin. We will always have to keep climbing that ladder and keep fighting those battles. But at the end of the day, we go in with optimism. One of the things that my mom has always instilled in me, not only as a woman, but as a leader, is open your ears first and then your mouth second. And I think politicians can really take that to account right now when it comes to negotiating matters, when it comes to listening to my generation, any generation for that matter, but really listening to what the people want to hear.
Okay, well, let's go to the two politicians here, and that I think that's a quite provocative thing that Catherine just said there. What would you say back to her in that thought, Senator Bewley? Why don't you go first?
Well, first of all, the role models, the fact that are there more women? If when you go into the caucus, you're with your colleagues, or into the Senate, and it's mostly men, well, you are going to automatically have to kind of maneuver that, figure out, and you can tell very quickly how people react to it. And there are still very kind gentlemen who are of a certain age that defer. They're very deferential to women. I say it's avuncular. They're acting like my uncle, and they're going to help me. And little lady, I'm 68 years old, and it's very sweet. I don't want sweet. I don't want sweet. You wouldn't do that to a young man. I mean, if he was 68, he wouldn't even be young. So I think we just have to keep doing it. We have to get a bench. We have to keep getting more and more women to see politics And I think that even for those of us who are in office, I can recollect that it took a long time to say, oh my goodness, look at all those things that ordinary people do. They run for city council, they run for school board, they run for mayor, they run for county board. And who are they? Well, they're me, you know, they're just a bunch of me. And it has to go off in your head. And when that had been done for generation after generation by men, it's hard to break in. It's hard to see, it's hard to recognize, and it's hard to get in. County boards are notorious for this kind of dynamic. There are county board chairs who have been there for 30 years. And there's, go into any county board or any town boards are even better. There's always like 90% men. And those of you who live in towns, 90% men, and then there's a town chair who's always been there for, again, 20, 30 years, and then there's a clerk, town clerk. Guess what? It's a woman.
Yeah.
Bar none. Bar none. The one who's taking notes, the one who collects everything, it's a woman. I would say 90% of the time. I'm not kidding. And she makes the coffee. I mean, these things just hang on. So, and I think it's a matter of, it's not people's intentions. It's just that in rural community, they are still back there. It's not that they are not smart. It's just that time moves more slowly in areas that are not seeing the changes in other places. But we have to make an effort to always let other young women know that these are the opportunities for you. This is what you could be doing. And you have to do it in an affirming way, where you seek out and let young women know that these are indeed legitimate opportunities for you. And until we get to the place where women are used to seeing themselves in all kinds of situations, there are 51%. There are more of us than you, Jeff. So there should be 51% women and 49% men. But we'll get there. We're going to get there. I'm proud that in my caucus, in our caucus, we're 7 and 7. 7 men, 7 women. Yay. So.
Right. Okay, Rebecca, I assume you have some viewpoints on this.
Well, I think, you know, Jeff, our little Brady Bunch here, we would like to see the WisPolitics virtual luncheon on the male vote, because here's the thing, we're not a special interest group.
No, we're not.
Women are 54% of the electorate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are some times where you have politicians and their campaigns and their consultants out of DC who think, well, we'll just shrink it and pink it, and these women are going to buy it because that's what we do here. We produce these policies and we produce these messages, and if we just package it right, this is what they're going to buy. And the fact is, you know, my peers on this luncheon, they're right. We do need to see ourselves in leadership. And that's why, you know, my hat is off to Carol, who talks about how she went to university when it wasn't popular. And she is in the Northwoods, and she's representing, you know, the educated and those women who were bright and enthusiastic about being decision makers and power players before it was the cool thing to do. Because I'll bet you dollars to donuts that Janet sees her and says, well, you know, this is clearly a path that I can go down because it's been tapped down a little bit. And that's a path that someone like me, I can follow, because I see women who have been there before me. You know, Erica mentioned market place. You see other women and minority business leaders, and you can network with them. And I started the Small Business Academy too, which is this half-day seminar for people who are just thinking about maybe starting their own small business, but they didn't have the time or the bandwidth to explore what that looked like. And so if they just had the small, 4-hour seminar, they might be able to determine whether it's for them. And then I think, Erica is a business leader. Catherine can turn around and follow in her footsteps confidently because she's seen it done. And then maybe Catherine one day will turn around and reach a hand back to my Ella and Violet. And I think that is the environment in which I am raising my daughters. Because a couple months ago, Jeff, you had a WisPolitics luncheon and I was on my computer with Barb Lott. And I don't know if you remember what she said, but it struck me like a ton of bricks. She said, there really wasn't anyone for me to look up to. And I was kind of expected to be a nurse or a secretary.
Mm-hmm.
And then you asked me the same question, and that was completely different from my life experience. I said, I kind of grew up thinking that boys and girls are completely equal and I could do whatever I wanted to do because my parents told me I could do whatever I wanted to do. And I think if we make sure that everyone in this country who is being raised in Gen Z and then their kids and then their kids feel that type of equality and opportunity in both education and the economy, we're just going to create a better world. And I realize I sound like Susie Sunshine, but somebody mentioned optimism. I think optimism is a really good quality to have.
Hey, I want to read some of the comments. This discussion is generating some really interesting comments here. Judy Gatlin says, young women need to start at a local level, a city or a county committee, school board, union leadership, city council, county board. Eau Claire County Board and Eau Claire City Council currently hold female majorities. Organizations need to refresh and not hold board meetings at 2 p.m. in the afternoon and make it less of a barrier to join. And then Senator Bewley, you got a shout out from somebody who said you are absolutely correct about town governments. I have seen it. Town boards are dominated by men, and the female town clerk does all the work.
Yeah.
So anyway, to get a little serious here, there is a serious question here, and this is from an anonymous attendee, but I think it's a pointed question. The pandemic has hurt women more than men, with job loss, increased caregiving responsibilities, and wage disparities. Has the pandemic changed the way you plan to vote, and why? So let's just start with Erica on that one.
Yes, that's the main reason why I'm voting this year. Like I said before, I've never voted and I didn't care, but after I saw what the United States is seeing, a good portion of them, we're all not going at the same direction. A lot of women are not being empowered to get the assistance as their male counterparts are. Just like the anonymous said, the women, we have to stay home. We have to be a stay-at-home mom, again, taking care of our kids, but we don't get the help. But they can go out and do their thing because that's just how the society is. But no, we're not getting any assistance. I know a lot of other moms they're the ones that have to make the decision, and because that's just how we are. We're again, I'm a lack of a word here, but that's just how we're being told. Women has to stay home. The woman has to take care. We have to make the decisions and changes in our jobs. Because we have office jobs, it's okay for us to stay home, take care of our kids, be the homeschool mom, the homeschool teacher, the nurse, basically everything. So there isn't any help that we're getting to be able to shift over some of the blame for our male counterparts. So we're basically on our own. It's we're a one-woman show, but because I want to be able to I'll bring my kids. I have 3 girls. I want to be able to empower them to be empowered to make changes in this world. The fact that a lot of things we're not being respected by politicians. We're not being looked at as a dominant part, but we're looked at as okay, well, just like Senator Bewley said, she's making coffee, she's taking the notes. Why isn't she a part of that board meeting? Why isn't she sitting there and having someone else taking those notes? Why is it that we always have to be catering and nursing and being the assistant? Let's take out that title. Let's empower our young. As a matter of fact, the other day, my daughter's like, Mom, can a woman ever be president? And I empower my daughters and I said, Mommy, any woman can be anything they put their minds to. The other day, I'm watching Facebook and I'm looking at my cousins, and she was like, quarantine life. I taught my sons how to use a hammer, and here's her daughter in the kitchen. I thought that's the biggest insult.
Mm-hmm.
I told my husband, I don't care if my daughters don't know how to cook. It's okay. But what I want to teach my daughters is that they have a voice. They have an opinion. And they are not going to be stuck in the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant, because that's what our society, our cultures, us as Latina women, as women, period, are teaching our daughters. There should be more programs to empower our young daughters to be great, powerful women in this country. And it's something we don't have. I don't see that anywhere.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great. Carol, what about the pandemic for you? Has that affected the way, or has that changed the way you're going to vote?
Only because it affects people that I love. It doesn't really affect me that much, but I'm concerned about our younger generations. And I think that many of my generation are concerned about their grandchildren and their children, who are, some of these other age groups that we've been talking about this morning. The things that affect them also affect us as the older generation. And I guess I have to be a little more optimistic than you, Erica, because in looking through the eyes of my grandkids and my kids, I see some of this optimism, and I see some of this caring, and I see some of this help that they're giving their families so that the woman can go out and do some other kinds of things. My oldest son, for example, cooks supper all the time. And that's because his wife is working later than he is, and she doesn't get home in time to make the dinner like, he does. So he cooks. I see all kinds of help with some of my nieces and nephews, helping their wives with the children, taking them in ways that, in places that they probably wouldn't have done in my generation. So I see a little bit more optimism coming up behind us. Not that we don't have more work to do, because we do. But I think that women are getting more vocal about what they want and need. And I think that their counterparts are listening to them. Not necessarily our politicians, but a lot of the men in their generation are listening to them. They're not, one of the big things I always think about is they don't interrupt them so much when they say they want something. They don't cut them off. They don't, they do listen. And I think in many cases they're trying to meet the challenge, which it truly is. It truly is a challenge. Where do you draw the line? Sometimes you have.
Carol, if I could just very quickly build on that, about what you were saying about men. There are things that in the legislature we can do to try to pave that way. For example, family leave.
Yep.
Normally, women have to stay at home with the baby and the dad goes. I know even the men that have said, I don't know nothing about no babies. When they're there with a newborn for 6 weeks, the bond that they've formed that other men have not had because they have to go to work, but they become a father, I mean, the touch, the time, the attention, the automatic positive bonding that I feel bad for how many never had it, you know, because they, you know, like Leave It to Beaver, the dad puts on his hat and walks out the door and mom stays home. We have the opportunity to do the things, to put the things in place so that men are given what they need in order to be the kind of dads we want them to be. And we've got to make it, you know, we can make it possible.
Yeah, I mean, well, the gender role issue. I mean, let's go a little bit more with the gender roles. You know, let's go to Rebecca. Rebecca, I remember
I don't know that I'm the right one. I just called my husband out of the kitchen and he has to do his Zoom in our bedroom. So I may not be the best person on that. If we get him in here, I'm sure he would have a whole bunch.
Yeah. So maybe we'll be doing that show about the goose recipes that we were talking about before the show began. But I remember Lieutenant Governor Farrow, you know, saying how when she started, how she had to go, you know, first she did the school board, and then she did the city council, and then she always had to go up the ladder.
And I skipped it all.
You skipped a bunch of steps, and so I do think that you know, future female electeds need to see that you don't always have to just do the ladder approach.
You don't. And I realize, I fully and openly acknowledge that my path to state governance was very atypical. But I did. I went from being a stay-at-home mom / small business owner, kind of like exactly Erica's life right now, to being lieutenant governor of a state with a population of 5.8 million people. I mean, that's extraordinary. That's a crazy American story, because stuff like that only happens in America. But I think there was a hunger in that moment for just like a regular person to serve, who also, you know, remember the time it was 2009, 2010, 2011, so just coming out of that deep recession, and we needed to kind of resurrect our economy, and I had marketing and media and public relations expertise. This would be a good fit for lieutenant governor's role, which had largely been undefined constitutionally. And so it was just a good fit in that moment. And the governor and I had been longtime friends, and so our working relationship was great. I had been a journalist, so I knew probably more than the average bear about politics and policy. And, you know, I'm a nerd. And so it worked because I like to study and learn things. And so my path was very atypical, but just because it was atypical doesn't mean other people can't do the exact same thing. And so I love the contributor to the conversation who said, yes, absolutely, run for school board, run for town board, run for county board, then run for state representative, then run for state senate, and then after that, run for lieutenant governor, and then after that, run for governor. Okay, that's awesome. Or you can just run for lieutenant governor and do it that way. I think that this is America. You can have the awesome power of self-determination, and then you can turn around and empower your little girls for that same self-determination. And that's exciting. And that to me is what this conversation is all about. Empowering the next generation to do crazy great things on behalf of our neighbors in Wisconsin.
Okay, I want to end with a, it's Carol, you want to say something?
I just wanted to ask Rebecca, how much help did you get from your husband when you were doing all of these things?
I will say this. Okay, so my husband was my state representative at the time. And so we understood politics, and we came from the news media. And so when you think about the mindset you have to have running for statewide office, that was something brought up in this conversation as well, the meanness, particularly in social media. I did an event for a female candidate last night, and she confessed that there was a day that she read her messages in Facebook Messenger, and she just cried. And I said, oh, don't do that.
Don't do
Don't
that,
read
no.
those.
Don't read
people
those.
Yeah, well, those
Don't
people
read
don't
those.
know you. I said,
Yeah.
if they knew you,
Yeah.
they would know
Mhm.
your heart, and they would never say those things about you. So you've got to understand the context. The context is, they're saying things because they have a certain belief set, and they are implying that you have the opposite belief set. They're just going to say it. But if they knew you and had a conversation with you, they wouldn't do that. But that's kind of why it's tough to get women to run for political office. The other piece is you've got to have someone who's willing to be helpful if you have kiddos at home. Remember when I ran, Violet was 4 and Ella was 7. And they had never known any other life besides politics, because Joel was in politics and I was at home. And most of the contract work I did was during naps. So to them, I was essentially the homeschool preschool mom, and would occasionally, work on a international GE contract. They had no idea what that stuff meant. But Joel was willing to really pitch in. If I had events to do, he would be there watching the girls. Occasionally my mom would help out. And then there was sometimes, honestly, that I had to bring them with. And there were some people who gave me a ton of pushback and said, you don't belong here, you belong at home with those kids. And then there were other people who were like, you go, I want to be represented, and I see you and I see what you got going on, and that's my life too. So, go be powerful and be my voice. And you're always going to get that. But, to me, it's what you sign up for when you run for political office. And maybe I'm in a better position to do that because of my time in news, when people ripped on me for my hairstyle and my outfits. Yes. That's dumb stuff. I don't care what you say about my hairstyle and my outfits. But if you tear into me on my political beliefs, I've had a lifetime to come to the conclusions that I have come to. And so I am happy to have that conversation with you.
Well, I guess the point that I was trying to make was that any man listening to this needs to step up and help promote the women in their lives to be the kind of people like you are, Rebecca.
Thanks. Thank you. Well, I'll tell Joel you said so once he emerges from his Zoom call, because I bumped him.
Okay, well, we're kind of running out of time here, but I want to go around the horn here and have each of you get some closing thoughts about your hopes for the political discussions going forward, and how women can be better involved in those. Why don't we go just start with you, Carol?
Oh wow, I just want to be optimistic, and I want to be the kind of person that encourages women to do what they are capable of doing, and I will continue to do that as long as I'm on this earth, and I hope I've done that in my teaching career. I think I have, because every once in a while a student will come back and say something to me that reminds me that I encouraged them to do something beyond what they were thinking that they were capable of, and that's always a good feeling.
Great. Erica, thank you for being part of this discussion today, Carol. Erica, what are some of your hopes for the times going forward here?
We have to go out and vote. I mean, again, I was not one of those people who went out and voted, so I would never have sat in part of this panel and say, yes, let's do this. But now I really feel passionate about it. I mean, as a small business owner, especially as a Latina, as a mom, as a student, as a veteran, as a person, like Rebecca said, who was taking care of our older generation. It affects my kids. It affects my husband, even though he's been the main supporter behind me in order for me to be able to do everything that I'm doing. But we have to, our votes do, and I hate to say this, that I am usually one that WIBIG is an organization that usually asks me to always speak and to entrepreneurs. And when I mentor them, I always say to them, the risk that we don't take is the one that we will never know what could happen. So if we're not willing to take that risk, we're not we don't know what that door behind holds for us.
Mhm.
That's what politics is. That's what voting is also. We have to be able to open that door, take that chance, that opportunity, that risk. And if we unite our votes, our voices, it can become very pretty loud. We have to be able to do this and show our kids that we matter, we count, and our voices are heard.
Erica, thanks for being part of the conversation. Catherine, UW Whitewater, what are your hopes here going forward?
One of my major hopes is that partisanship can be set aside when it comes to making compromise. I think that's one of the biggest things that we're facing right now, not even if it's just the physical representation of the color of your skin, your party identification, ideology, whatever it may be. Put those thoughts aside. We live in a pandemic world where it's a very uneasy time, and it's something that nobody really knows or nobody really is used to, nor do we have the answers to. So I think it's a time that we really need to come together as a democracy and unite as one, regardless of where you come from or what your background may be, and bring those thoughts and innovative ideas together so then we can move forward together, united as the country that we are, United States of America.
All right. Thank you very much for being part of this discussion. So Rebecca, what are your closing thoughts here?
Thanks, Jeff. I will go right back to the theme of the afternoon, which is generational. And as an Xer, I think we are the last generation that grew up without cell phones in our childhood at any time. And I was once called, and I tried really hard not to take offense, a digital immigrant, which meant that I did not grow up learning the computer, and I had to, come into the language of the internet and how to speak intergenerationally online. And I also have the other half of, millennial and Gen Z, where we have adopted this technology. And we were joking earlier before we started the live stream that I learned something on TikTok. And, this is the generation that has kind of the best of both worlds, the best of the boomers and then the best of the millennial and Gen Z ideas. And I think during election time in particular, we need to really rest in that, both personal communication and interpersonal contact, and making sure that we're making those pleas friend to friend, neighbor to neighbor, relative to relative, to vote and about the issues we care about, but also that we're responsibly and gracefully using social media to influence those same people.
All right, thanks for being part of the conversation today, Rebecca. Okay, Senator Bewley, your closing thoughts, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for doing this. I think it was it was a lot of fun, and I appreciate all the insights of everyone on the panel, and Jeff, you too. I think that what I would take from this and what we've all talked about today is that as much as we want to see women have access to everything, we have to admit that it's not only women, it is many different segments of our society want to be able to see a future that other people can have. And that where we can help people to lift them up to that level playing field, it is our responsibility. If we think of the people from, let's talk women, if we think of the women from whom we would say, okay, I'm going to mentor this person, by that time, that person that you want to mentor has already probably been raised up through quite a few obstacles. What about the person who never even had that chance, who never got that far? And they're still left behind year after year, generation after generation. We need to figure out a way to bring them up so that they'll be a part of the people that can choose to make choices. And I want to thank Erica for that comment about the risk not taken. And I do still believe that women have more moments when they can't take the risk because of the responsibilities that they have. That men typically are able to shed responsibilities, particularly in the home, and take that risk. But women can't. If they've got children, if there's a home, if there's a choice, usually it's the woman who is left not able to take that risk. And thank you for that. That frames it very, very well.
Yeah, and thank you to all of you. We have to wrap it up here now, but this has been a lot of fun and it's been inspiring. I mean, really appreciate your heartfelt comments. So want to thank everybody for participating. Want to thank all the people who submitted questions and all the people who listened in. And thank you to our sponsor for this program today, AARP Wisconsin. And we'll be back with other programs in October 2nd, October 8th, 9th, October 15th. You can find out all the information you need at wispolitics.com. So thanks to all of you. And this is Jeff Mayer signing off for now.